जय श्री हरि। गुरु पूर्णिमा के पावन उपलक्ष्य पर आप सबका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है। श्री हरि की कृपा सदा आप पर बनी रहे। इस शुरू में एक संदर्भ में इसी कृपा के संदर्भ में कुछ हिंदी में बोलकर आई विल देन बी स्पीकिंग इन इंग्लिश अ लिटिल बिट। मैंने ये इसलिए आरंभ किया कि जीवन में श्री हरि की कृपा बनी रहे और भगवान की कृपा बनी रहे, परिस्थितियां लगभग अनुकूल रहें, क्योंकि प्रयत्न तो प्रत्येक मनुष्य यथासंभव करता ही है। ये संभव है कि कोई व्यक्ति ज्यादा मेहनत कर सके जितनी कि वो करता है, परंतु अपने मन के अनुरूप, अपने शरीर के अनुरूप, अपनी अपनी व्यवस्था के अनुरूप, अपने वातावरण के अनुरूप प्रत्येक मनुष्य जो कर सकता है वो करता ही है। और कई बार बस एक ही जो मूल वस्तु है उसकी कमी या उसका पर्याप्त होना ही सफलता और असफलता का एक हिस्सा रहता है। बहुत वर्ष हुए, एक मैंने बड़ी सुंदर बात सुनी थी और शायद आपको किसी आश्रम के किसी प्रवचन में बताई भी हो। एक पंजाबी में एक सॉन्ग है जिसको बोलते हैं छल्ला। और छल्ला के कई मीनिंग हो सकते हैं, रिंग को भी बोलते हैं या प्रेम से भी किसी को बोल देते हैं छल्ला। और एक जिन्होंने सबसे पहले जिन्होंने सबसे पहले इस गाने को गाया था वो एक पाकिस्तानी सिंगर थे। मुझे उनका पूरा नाम नहीं याद आ रहा, इनायत खान शायद, इनायत अली या कुछ ऐसा। तो वो जो सॉन्ग था, कई वर्षों की बात है, हर पंजाबी सिंगर ने इस सॉन्ग को ज़रूर गाया है। तो वो जो गाना था बहुत प्रसिद्ध हो गया, सुप्रसिद्ध हो गया। उन दिनों में वायरल हुआ जब वायरल नाम का वर्ड एग्जिस्ट नहीं करता था, शायद जब वायरस होता था उसी को बोलते थे, वायरल हो गया। और एक बार एक इंटरव्यू में उनसे पूछा गया कि आप ने ये जब गाना लिखा तो आपको पता था कि ये इतना लोकप्रिय हो जाएगा? आपको पता था कि लोग इसको इतना पसंद करेंगे या इतना ज़्यादा प्रचलित हो जाएगा? और आपने क्या कभी सोचा था कि आपको इतनी प्रसिद्धि मिलेगी? तो वो जो गायक थे उन्होंने एक बड़ी सुंदर बात बोली। पंजाबी उर्दू है, मतलब क्योंकि पाकिस्तान पंजाब से थे वो तो पहले शायद मैं पंजाबी में ही बोलूंगा, फिर आपको हिंदी में समझाऊंगा। तो उन्होंने मूलतः कहा, देखिए मैं तो अपना काम कर रहा था। और पंजाबी में बोला, ये देखो जिमें हवा दी लहर चलदी है ना, ਅਸੀਂ ਸਾਰੇ अपना अपना पतंग उड़ा रहे सी, ਉਹ लहर आई ते साडी गुड्डी भी हवा 'ਚ चढ़ गई उत्ते। उनका कहने का अर्थ था कि देखिए, हम तो सबकी भांति अपने पतंग उड़ा रहे थे और ऐसी तरंग चली, ऐसी हवा चली, ऐसी हवा बही कि मेरा जो पतंग था वो भी आसमान में गोते खाने लगा, वो भी लहलहाने लगा। तो कई बार जीवन में कृपा का इतना सा ही मूल होता है कि वो आती है एक लहर की भांति और हमारे पतंग को, जीवन रूपी पतंग को ऊपर चढ़ा देती है। परंतु उसके बाद क्या कृपा, क्या हमेशा हवा वैसे ही बहती रहेगी? उसके आधारभूत होता है कि मनुष्य की स्वयं की वृत्ति और उसके स्वयं की जो जो सामर्थ्य है वो कैसा है। पतंग तो एक बार ऊपर चढ़ जाएगा, परंतु उसके बाद क्या हम तैयार हैं उस पतंग को हवा में रखने के लिए? और क्या हम तैयार हैं उस स्थित प्रज्ञता के साथ कि कभी ना कभी उस पतंग को नीचे भी उतारना पड़ेगा? इतना सा ही कृपा का आधार होता है। और ये भी आवश्यक नहीं है कि कृपा हमेशा एक बहुत भारी लहर की भांति आए। कई बार वो मंद मंद हवा की भांति बहती है मनुष्य के जीवन में, उसके चित्त में, उसके चिंतन में, उसके मन में, जिससे कि उसका जीवन धीरे धीरे चलता रहता है, परिवर्तित होता रहता है। और जहाँ तक हमारे जीवन का सवाल है, किसी भी व्यक्ति के, यदि हम किसी के थोड़ा काम आ सकें, थोड़ा हमारे धर्म का उत्थान कर सकें, थोड़ा समाज का कार्य कर सकें, थोड़ा परिवार का कर सकें, थोड़ा अपने शरीर शरीर को स्वस्थ रख सकें, तो कहीं ना कहीं बस उतना सा ही चाहिए होता है। जीवन तो सबका कट ही जाता है। मेरा जो ये वर्ष है बहुत अधिक व्यस्त चल रहा है। सही में बताएं तो इवन इस इवेंट के लिए ऑनलाइन आना मेरे लिए थोड़ा सा चैलेंजिंग था, बिकॉज आजकल मैं एक बुक पर काम कर रहा हूँ। एक तो आप सब मुझे 4 अक्टूबर को ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं। काफ़ी सारे लोग जो लोग हैं वहाँ पर भारत में, वो जगह का क्या नाम है, मुझे याद नहीं। जहाँ भी आ रहे हैं, यशोभूमि। तो यशोभूमि में हम सबसे आपकी भेंट होगी, जहाँ पर हमने जो नई किताब लिखी है, द भगवत गीता रीटोल्ड, उसको भी शेयर करेंगे। परंतु उसके अतिरिक्त मैं एक और पुस्तक पर काम कर रहा हूँ। जब मैं लिखने बैठता हूँ तो साधारणतः क्या होता है कि 45 मिनट्स में, 45 मिनट में मैं 1000 शब्द जो है लिखता हूँ। परंतु ये जो मैं बुक लिख रहा हूँ, इसमें सिर्फ जो पहला चैप्टर है उसको लिखने में मुझे 80 से ज़्यादा घंटे लगे हैं। और इसमें वो इंक्लूडेड नहीं है जो पहले जीवन में जो साधना की और जो ज्ञान को अर्जित किया, जो अध्ययन किया। मात्र इस चैप्टर को लिखने में 80 आवर्स लगे हैं। तो आज गुरु पूर्णिमा के उपलक्ष्य पर मैंने सोचा कि क्यों ना मैं आपको एक चैप्टर पढ़ के सुना दूं। पहला, सो जो द बुक दैट आई एम राइटिंग, अभी आई विल स्पीक इन इंग्लिश इफ दैट्स ओके विथ यू, बिकॉज एज यू नो आई राइट इन इंग्लिश। And the name of the book, it's working title, but most likely that will be the name of the book. It's called The Legend of Rudra. It is based on my Shri Rudram sadhana, but most importantly, my intention behind writing this book is to make you familiar with the glory of one of the most important and potent Vedic hymns of all time, Shri Rudram, also known as Shatarudriya or Rudrashtadhyay or just Rudram. So, ordinarily, when we talk about Vedic hymns, we don't know who wrote them, humans or our ancestors or forefathers, or what was the reason behind writing such things. Was there a story behind it? So, some of the most famous hymns, as you might have also read my book, The Legend of the Goddess, where I've spoken about Sri Suktam, and how over thousands of years various sages invoked various verses of that beautiful Vedic hymn. Similarly, Sri Rudram also has a very compelling and absolutely astounding story behind it, or I should say, a set of stories. So, my plan is to finish this book within this year, and hopefully, it will be out next year at the latest, if not a bit sooner. So, if you like, should I go ahead and read the first chapter? And if I feel enough energy and participation, don't know, don't worry, I know how to feel that. Then maybe I might read the second chapter as well. But let's begin with the first chapter, shall we? So, excuse me. Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya. So before I begin, the first chapter is the, sort of the scene setting. It could almost read as a prologue, so you might find it a little slow, but I really wanted to cover the depths of it, so to speak. So we'll begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya. Thousands of years on, the peerless Shri Rudram stands unchallenged. Composed by the Devas to propitiate Shiva, it endures as the most powerful Vedic hymn of Prashchita, atonement. But to propitiate or please Shiva wasn't the only reason. Long before Shiva was known for holding a trident, he wielded the most powerful weapon in the universe, the Pinaka, his splendid bow. Even a casual pluck of the bow sent the Maruts, the gods of storms, raging across the Himalayas, shuddering mountains, felling trees like matchsticks, tearing through everything that came their way. Pinaka did not roar like thunder. If anything, it produced a single low rumble, hardly perceptible, and by the time one heard it, one would be a mound of ash in a vast rubble. The cosmos had a master, and the master had a bow, and as long as that bow was strung and in his hand, whoever stood beside him won. That was the law, and there was no clause beneath it. And so, at Vishnu's command, the Devas had come to his palatial abode, Vaikuntha, a place devoid of anxiety. And yet, here they were, anxious and afraid, even though everything about that place, and above all, Vishnu, was nothing but tranquil. The gardens of Vaikuntha breathed with hibiscus and jasmine, with lotuses rising from still pools. The Devas stood in a loose crescent before Vishnu. Indra and Surya, then Varuna and Vayu, followed by Agni and the others. And a half step ahead of him, all Brihaspati, their guru. You have two aims, Vishnu told the Devas. Win Shiva's favor and get him to lay down his bow. He exuded a sense of omniscience as he sat on his exalted throne, parasoled by the great serpent Ananta. In one corner of the great hall, a gentle smoke of camphor rose and coiled upon the air. In another, the mellow warmth of sandalwood. The whole palace seemed to breathe a reassuring, fragrant haze. But the world outside wasn't as serene. The Devas had cheated their cousins, the Asuras, out of their share of nectar, and retaliation was imminent. They couldn't afford Shiva to side with anyone else but them. Yes, the Devas had their chariots and advanced warfare. The Asuras had their fortresses and dark sciences. But Shiva had the rest. Tantra, alchemy, mantras, krityas, every natural calamity and all arcane sciences were not merely his to wield, but they had originated from him. His were the ganas, that wild company of attendants who answered to no law but his own. His were the forest dwellers who knew the speech of trees and birds, of apes and every creature of the wild. And his too were the pretas, goblins, bhutas, the ghosts of the unmourned dead, vakras, the deformed, the outcast, the ones exiled from every other tribe in creation. Yakshas, Rakshasas, Daityas, or anyone at all, none were turned away, for Shiva kept no account of who was worthy of his protection. They were his army, and they had pledged their allegiance to Shiva. You couldn't even kill most of them because they were already dead. A single Veerbhadra sprung from one strand of his matted locks had laid waste the yajna of Prajapati Daksha and scattered the Devas in terror. What then an entire ocean of such beings might accomplish, none dared imagine. The Devas needed Shiva not just this one time but for eternity, and yet who among them could hope to bind him? For one thing, Shiva was not one of them. The elaborate governing councils or the striving of heaven with its thrones, territories, and ceaseless intrigue meant nothing to him. While Indra fretted over his position and Varuna over his oceans, Shiva lived in intense solitude. Spending his time between Kailasha, his icy cave, and Chintamani Graha, the unearthly palace of Mother Divine in an interstellar world, he mostly sat on a mountain no one had measured, doing something no one really understood, surrounded by those no one else would keep. Pardon my transgression, Brihaspati said, but surely merely hearing a hymn wouldn't make the ever impartial Shiva our ally. Vishnu chuckled, for if anyone knew Shiva better than his own consort, Mother Divine, it was he. Actually, he said, other than a song that melts his heart, there is nothing anyone can offer him. The tender garland of jasmine swayed a little in the wake of a breeze, as did the dark curls his crown could not quite hold in place. Vishnu spoke truly. Set beside Shiva, Indra and the Devas were no more than raindrops trembling on the lip of a cloud before the immensity of an old, shoreless ocean. And Shiva was old, all right. Not like the Devas who tallied their years in yugas, but more like how the universe is old. He had beheld Srishti and Pralaya, creation rise and dissolve more times than the Devas had names for. He had sat in samadhi before the eldest of them drew breath, and he would sit on long after the last of them had passed on from memory. I don't see why we need to worry. We are immortal, Indra said. Besides, the asuras are selfish, diabolical, and brutal. Your words, though outwardly wise, reek of ignorance, Purandara, Brihaspati chastised Indra. Immortality doesn't mean you are beyond torture and suffering. If Shiva grants refuge to the asuras, do you think it would matter to him that you drank some nectar from a chalice? Let me remind you, Shiva governs death. Death. Every deva or asura was born from someone. They all had a clan, a lineage, progeny, something or someone, but not Shiva. Legends say he had just mysteriously appeared on Kailasha one day, completely out of the blue. Even Vishnu called him Ajanma, Ajara, Amara, beyond birth, old age, and death. He was Para, beyond, Parapara, beyond what's beyond. Shiva could not be bought, flattered, or frightened. Safe to say that it was impossible to lure the Mahayogi. The only way out was to win his mercy. Vishnu knew that. Just like he also knew that without Shiva's alliance and benevolence, the Devas didn't stand a chance against the Asuras. Therefore, Vishnu said to the Devas, the ode to Shiva must ooze with devotion, surrender, and his glories. It must be unlike anything ever composed before, something befitting Rudra. Above all, it must be true, it must be sincere, and it must be genuine. You know he will not forgive vanity and flattery. Gather your deepest sentiments for Shiva and tie them neatly into a meter. Pour your heart out. He must give up his bow. As Vishnu leaned forward, the garland stirred and parted for a moment to reveal the divine marks upon his chest, the Shri Vatsa, the sacred curl where Shri herself abides, and the Kaustubha ablaze beside it. The Devas noticed and looked away and noticed again. Brihaspati stood with his head bowed but urged Vishnu to reconsider. What was stopping the Asuras from chanting the same hymn to Shiva, he thought. He looked into the distance as if reading a scroll and foresaw phenomenal sages like Kashyapa, Shukracharya, Vishrava, and others who would help the Asuras. I have turned it every way, Bhagavan. I can find no path that does not also arm our enemies. There is none. Your foresight is unimpeachable, Brihaspati, and yet it has an edge, Vishnu said. What you cannot see is not, for that reason, absent. The hymn had to be made tamper-proof and composed in a manner that chanting it would make it harmful to the asuras, he told them. But how? The Devas asked in unison as if they had rehearsed this question. Leave that to me, Vishnu said, without elaborating further. It was as if time had stood still. The only movement was a cool breeze that meandered through the length of the hall every now and then, playfully trying to catch a glimpse of Narayana. And the colored sheer drapes that hung in surrender from high ceilings would bellow and settle, ebb and flow, fanning the heady and mysterious scent. Everything you envision must come to pass, Bhagavan, Brihaspati faltered, and yet there will be repercussions. Vishnu finished the thought for him. I never said there won't be. But that is precisely why I exist. I will bear the consequences. That is my whole worry, Lord. Brihaspati clasped Bhagavan's feet. Why should you always suffer on our account? Through all of it, Vishnu had not stirred. Brihaspati's knuckles were pale where they gripped his feet. The other devas swaying and murmuring around him, and at the still center of them all he sat, dark as a gathering rain cloud and just as calm. One hand open upon his knee as though he were not being implored but merely resting. He alone already knew the price. He had known it before the question was framed, and it had not touched his face for a single moment. That was the most unsettling thing of all, more unsettling than any glance of Shiva's. Not that the cost was coming, but that Hari had seen it, chosen it, and smiled. Indra and the other devas stood there almost clueless, resenting Brihaspati for dampening the moment and not seeing the task done. They loved Vishnu, they revered him, but above all, they saw him as their ruler and as such always turned to him to extricate them from any current, imminent, and future troubles. Seen, unforeseen, or foreseen, it didn't matter. Brihaspati, though, had no such motive. He had already realized that this time and many times again and again in the future, it was Vishnu who would suffer repeatedly for the Devas, humans, and humanity as a whole. If Shiva was Bholenath, Vishnu was Jagannath. If one was Karunanidhi, the other was Kripanidhi. If Shiva was Girivar, Vishnu was Giridhar. One had a serpent coiled around his neck, and the other sat on a coiled serpent. They were one and the same, and it did not feel right to Brihaspati that Shiva was being asked to forsake his bow and that Vishnu would suffer on account of it. Then again, it was impossible to fathom Vishnu's Leela. The decree had been passed, and execution must follow. What do we call it? The Devas asked him. Vishnu's face softened, and a glimmer crossed his eyes, just as it does when you reminisce about a fond memory. In that instant, Vishnu read the past, present, and future of all futures, including perhaps this very moment of me narrating this forgotten history and you hearing it. The seeds of divine play had already been scattered across the many universes, and now it would take eons before the whole thing would unfurl in full majesty. But since when has Hari ever been in a hurry? Not now, not ever. Shri Rudram, he said, and closed his eyes in contemplation. And far, far away on Kailasha, where the snow lay blue in the last of the light, the Mahayogi smiled. Somewhere beyond the galaxies, an eternal song had just been given his name. So that was the first chapter. I hope you liked it. If you like, I can also read the second one, but the second one is pretty long. It's twice the length of the first one. You want me to? Okay. All right, so I'll read the second one, and feel free to sleep through if you feel like sleeping. Because books have this melatonin. You hold the book and you can almost fall asleep. But anyway, let me read the second chapter for you. Sorry. So I'll continue. The divine architect, Vishwakarma, built a special hall in Vaikuntha where the Devas were sequestered to compose the Sri Rudram. Lord Vishnu held a private audience with manifest Vedmata Gayatri, the mother of the Vedas, asking her to foresee the endeavor, asking her to oversee the endeavor and to ensure that no gimmicks or vanities slipped into the verses. It must be composed with the purest devotion, he told her. The ode must be made tamper-proof, and as Vishnu had said, be done in a manner to prevent the asuras from chanting. Vishwakarma's construction ensured that the Vedic verses wouldn't travel outside the hall while the composition was in progress. The composition hall itself was a sight to behold. Its floor of polished moonstone sweated cool water when the mantras grew intense. Vedmata sat Ananga, formless, unseen among them, and every syllable that was worthy she let stand, and every syllable born of vanity she quietly withdrew. Brihaspati led the first verse, and Surya provided unlimited radiance to every syllable. Namaste Rudramanyavatot Ishave Namaha. Namaste Astu Dhanvane Bahubhyam Utate Namaha. O Rudra, salutations to you and your fury. We bow before your mighty bow and your strong arms. A strange hush fell over as the first verse was written. Tears rolled down Brihaspati's cheeks. The beginning had begun. The Devas, after a silence of a few heartbeats, broke out chanting with vigor. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya echoed heavily in the composition hall. Even though Vishnu was not physically present there, they well knew that in essence he was present everywhere. He was their very soul, and it was his doing. The composition began flowing like the gentle Himalayan stream. And it was not a surprise, for an august assembly such as this, headed by Brihaspati, overseen by Ved Mata herself, directed by none other than Vishnu, nothing less could be expected. These were the very devas who were present at the Samudra Manthan when Shiva had rode into the congregation, when he had consumed the halahala. They were there when Goddess Shri had emerged, as had all the jewels and the nectar. They were the best of the best. With all their flaws and misgivings, they had never really crossed Vishnu's word, and for that alone, they were invincible and supremely wise. A few days later, Vishnu called Brihaspati and Ved Mata in his chambers and gave them the following verse to include in the first canto itself. Adhyavocha dadivakta prathmo devyo vishaka. Ahigishcha sarva anajambhyanta sarva ascha yatu dhanya. You are the first word, the first speaker, the first medicine, and the first healer. O Rudra, you subdue all serpents and protect us from the asuras. Brihaspati's gaze met Vishnu's twinkling eyes. The work was done. This verse would ensure that the asuras couldn't chant Shri Rudram, as it sought protection from the asuras themselves. This verse applies to you just as well, Brihaspati said to Vishnu. He thought, why is Bhagwan being so humble and declaring Shiva to be the first word speaker, medicine, and healer? He too can subdue all serpents and protect us from the asuras. After all, in his future avatars as Vamana, he will deliver the great Asura king Bali. As Narasimha, he will tear open the invincible Hiranyakashipa. As Rama, he will slay Ravana and other asuras, and as Krishna, he will deliver Kamsa and neuter the great serpent Kaliya. Rise above duality, Brihaspati. Vishnu said, reading his mind. There is no difference between Shiva and I. This petty analysis does not befit you. Brihaspati sought Vishnu's pardon. He, of all the devas, knew better. Vishnu began where the Vedas ended. Ved Mata and Brihaspati made their way back to the great hall, with the former once again disappearing into the sonic energy of the mantras. The whole hymn was woven so tightly that pulling out a single word would break the chandas, the meter, and render it useless. That was Vishnu's device, and only Ved Mata knew how it was done. The Shri Rudram, as it were, turned out to be an exquisite garland of devotion, ending with Namaha, salutations, in the beginning and ending of each verse. When the last verse settled into place, no one cheered. The Devas sat in the wet moonlight, spent, relieved, and elated. They were in disbelief that it was finally done, although it was far from done. The entire ode, in line with the tenets of the science of mantras, the foundation of which was laid by none other than Shiva himself, had to be awakened now so that it became fit for offering. Starting with japa recitation, every mantra of Sri Rudram and the whole of it in its entirety had to be chanted at least 100 million times. Each verse had to pass through fire, be bathed, anointed, and coronated by way of yagna, tarpana, marjana, and abhishekam in the rule of Dashansha, 1/10. Massive fire pits were set up, and with Brihaspati as the Ritvik, The Devas chanted the mantras of Sri Rudram. Agni personally partook of every offering. Varuna brought forth most distilled and freshest water in enormous cauldrons for tarpana oblations. The Ashwin twins prepared the most divine concoctions in giant vats for marjana libations. Collectively, they all contributed a whole plethora of offerings for Abhishekam, coronation of Sri Rudram. The endeavor lasted more than one Deva year. It is finished, Brihaspati said at last. He did not particularly sound glad. May Rudra forgive us for what we are about to ask of him. With Vishnu's permission and blessing, they made way to Kailasha. Vishnu had forbade them to travel like kings. Go like a devotee, he said, in the spirit of a seeker. As a result, the Devas who could ordinarily cross worlds in a thought took the better part of a year to reach Kailasha. The summit of Kailasha was only a few hundred miles of arduous trek from Indra's city Amravati, but presently the Devas were traveling from Vaikuntha, which was much further. Throughout their journey, the only mantra they were allowed to chant from Sri Rudram was Om Namo Bhagavate Rudraya. The rest had to be first offered to Shiva. And so, like a group of enthusiasts, in fond remembrance of Vishnu and in eager anticipation of a lover on a journey to meet their beloved, they moved through the dense forests. Wading rivers, hiking mountains, crossing plains, as they moved closer to Kailasha, the change in the energy was as palpable as the one in flora and fauna. The summit of Kailasha at the time was not the snow-buried peak that men would later imagine. Eons ago, the mountain wore a forest-like green shawl thrown over its shoulders. Deodar and sandalwood and teak rose so tall that their crowns were lost in mist, and the air between them was thick and sweet, an air you could almost drink. Sunlight came down in long, slanted bars through the canopy and moved across the moss as the day turned. Here was one patch emerald, and now another light as sea green. It was as if one carried a lamp from room to room in a large house at night. Somewhere, water was always falling. You never saw it, you only heard it. Under everything, like you hear your own heartbeat when a room goes quiet. It was as if every leaf on every tree, every droplet in every stream, every insect and every creature was chanting Har Har Mahadev, Har Har Mahadev. The Devas too began chanting loudly Har Har Mahadev. It just sprang out from the depths of their consciousness. They were beginning to see why Vishnu had commanded them to propitiate Shiva. It wasn't just the Kailasha with everything in it, but it seemed that the whole creation stood in absolute surrender to the Mahayogi. They passed the Ganas on the way up, and none stopped them. Word had gone ahead. A one-eyed Gana with a garland of small bones watched them go by and said nothing, only tilted his head. And Vayu felt the hair on his arms lift and did not know why. At the top, part of the mountain had been shorn flat, and there sat Shiva. A few hours earlier, he had asked Mother Divine, his consort, to see if she wanted to bathe with the yoginis in the pool or camp in the ethereal forest or even just rest. She had turned down those suggestions and said that she only wanted to be around. None said to the other anything about the illustrious guests about to visit, but both knew that the other knew. Shiva sat under a single banyan. There was no other banyan for 1,000 miles, nothing in that cold forest of pine and cedar a banyan tree could have grown from, and yet there it was, ancient. Its aerial roots come down like 100 grey arms to grip the rock, its branches reaching to one another overhead until they made a roof of living wood. It did not belong there. But no one who looked at Shiva under it could imagine the tree anywhere else. or him under anything else. Beside him, a dhuni, a fire pit, breathed low blue flame over a smoldering log of sandalwood. And the trident stood planted in the earth with a soft coat of grey ash on it, as if it had not been touched in quite some time. An inverted skull, cut into a bowl, held his water. He was smeared in ash from crown to foot. Rudraksha on his arms, his matted hair bound high, and around his throat the great cobra Takshaka lay coiled and awake. Some of the Ganas stood in attendance at a distance. The Devas fell full length on the rock. For a long while, Shiva said nothing. The fire ticked. A leaf came down. "You have traveled a long way," he said at last, and his voice was not what they had braced for. It was low and unhurried and almost kind. "We have not come because we are in trouble." Brihaspati spoke the pseudo-truth. "You think?" And Shiva threw back his head and laughed. "Sit. The fire is warm." They sat, all of them, in a loose crescent, exactly as they had sat before Vishnu, and it struck Brihaspati that they spent their whole existence sitting in arcs before someone asking. Mother Goddess came out from behind the banyan tree, and the Ganas straightened. She was truly Niranjani, spotless, petite and full at once. It was as if from behind the tree the moon peeped. She was carrying an armful of dried bilva leaves for the fire. It was one of her favorite things to do for Shiva, and she saw to it that she did it herself. She stopped when she saw who her guests were, and she did not smile. Mother Divine has a way of looking that is older than suspicion, older than welcome. She looked at Indra and at Varuna and at Agni and last and longest at Brihaspati. And she set the bilva leaves down slowly. The clinking of her anklets almost sounded like exotic birds making a mellifluous call in spring. It was hypnotic. "The Devas," she said. The rest she left unsaid for a moment. The intoxicating scent would put a whole planet of flowers to shame. "Devi, Mother Goddess," Brihaspati said, clearing his throat to earn a moment so he could regain his composure. "We offer our repeated obeisance at your lotus feet." "Would have helped if your song had any indication of it," the omniscient Shiva said mirthfully, as if he was enjoying the tension that hung like a fruit from a tree. "The last time you climbed this mountain," Mother Divine said, and her voice was pleasant, which was worse. "You had churned an ocean and you could not manage the one thing that came up first. So Mahadev drank your poison, all of it. I held his head while it went black here." She touched her own throat, "and stayed black. No one visited to see if it healed all right." Nobody answered. "And having drunk your poison for you, he asked for nothing. Then you took the nectar that came up after, and you took it for yourselves, depriving your own cousins of their share, and there was a war. And it is not over. And now," she paused, "now you've climbed this summit a second time with something behind your teeth. Devas do not climb Kailasha for the view." "Varanane," Shiva said, "only that." She looked at him a long moment, and something passed between them Devas could not read. The whole silent understanding of two people who have been in divine union across the depths of universes. She stepped back and stood by the trident with her arms folded. And Brihaspati understood she had not withdrawn her objection. She had only agreed to let it play out. But something stirred deep in his consciousness, and he realized it was all a divine leela. Vishnu's counsel, Shiva's kindness, Divine Mother's terse words, it was all a scripted play, he felt. She was not there to chastise them, but for another very specific reason. Something that would unfold over a period of time. Well then, Shiva said, let's hear it. You did not walk a year to sit quiet. Brihaspati rose, as did the Devas. His mouth was dry, countless months of work, and now that it came to it, every word felt like an impertinence. He glanced once at the Pinaka, which leaned against the far side of the banyan, strung, a length of dark horn taller than any of them, and he thought, we have come to ask him to set that down, as though asking the sky to set down its blue. With a mental prayer to Vishnu, he began. The others came in behind him. Indra, Surya, Agni, then Vayu, then all of them, and the Shri Rudram rose off Kailasha for the first time. It did not sound like flattery, that was the first thing. It came out raw and unguarded, a hymn that named Shiva not only as the auspicious one, but as the terror, the fever, the arrow, the thief, the lord of thieves, the one in the rocks and the one in the leaf fall, holding nothing back, hiding nothing, hiding from him least of all. And as it climbed, something began to happen on the mountain. The Ganas came, the one-eyed one with the bone garland, and behind him others, the deformed and the outcast and the unmourned, the beings no other tribe in creation would accept. The forest dwellers came, apes and does and grey wolves, snow leopards and owls, and a tiger lay down at the tree line and put its chin on its paws. The birds fell silent. None had been summoned. They came the way water finds a low place without deciding to. They didn't know Sanskrit or mantra science or Vedic meters, but they knew the song was singing the glories of their Lord. The Devas continued chanting and reached the verse they had built the whole hymn to carry. Brihaspati's voice did not tremble now. Shivam Giritratam Kurumahigum Save Purushan Jagata. O mountain dweller, render that arrow auspicious, harm neither individual nor world. Pramuncha Dhanvanastav Mubhyo Ratrir Yorjayam. Loosen the bowstring from both ends of your bow. They did not soften what he was. Only after honoring the whole of him, the weapon and all, did they dare ask. They knew that you do not ask Rudra to stop being Rudra. You ask him to turn the force the other way. And so they said to him, Pramuncha Dhanvanastava, unstring the Pinaka. Not from one end, which a man might do to rest the bow and restring it in a breath, but from both ends. Take the tension out of it entirely. Make it, for the moment, only wood. And because they were afraid of what they had asked, because a request that large needs somewhere to land, they gave him the way to do it gently. Parme vrikshayudhan nidhaya kritim vasana achar pinakam vibradagahi. Lay down your weapons upon the highest tree, clothed in your garment of hide, come walking towards us, bearing the Pinaka bow. When the hymn ended, you could hear a leaf drop as if the beating of a loud drum. Shiva had not moved through any of it, but when the chanting concluded, he turned his head and looked at the Pinaka. You have brought to me a fully awakened mantra, he said. Vishnu doesn't falter, does he? The playful Narayana never leaves anything to chance now, does he? The Devas nodded along with Brihaspati. He was a bit relieved, as were the Devas, that there was joy in Shiva's voice. And you did not lie to me once. He seemed almost surprised. You called me the fever. You called me the arrow. You did not pretend I was only gentle. Most who want something from me tell me I am only gentle. He gave a short, quiet laugh, and Takshaka stirred at his throat. You would be amazed, Brihaspati, how tiring it is to be told you are kind by people who are frightened of you. We are frightened of you. Brihaspati said, we wrote that down too. Shiva looked at him then, and the look was long, and Mother Divine watched Mahadev's face and knew before the Devas did. He rose, he took the pinaka in both hands, lifted it, and loosened the string from both ends. He set it up into the high branches of the tree that did not belong there, and the tree closed a few leaves around it, how a hand closes around something given for keeping. Then he came back and sat down. And where the bow had been, there was now only an empty place against the trunk. And the mountain felt it. Every Gana felt it. It is done, Shiva said. I cannot say no to my beloved Hari. Tell him also that I know it was his hand behind the meter, and that I know what it will cost him, and that he did it anyway, which is the reason I have laid down the bow and not you. He almost smiled. Something eased in Mother Divine's face and her eyes warmed, but she had already made up her mind to not let this sublime and utterly powerful hymn be confined to these moments alone. It had to travel for the benefit of the world, and the world must know the glories of Mahadev, she thought. At any rate, none could have imagined the extraordinary chain of events it would set for thousands of years to come. No ordinary mind could have conceived that what started with Vishnu would go a full circle and end with him. Or that a simple unstringing of the bow would bring into existence the most sublime hymn of devotion, penance and atonement. If today was not the end, which it wasn't, it was certainly not the beginning either. For the destiny was now on an irreversible course. It might then be the end of the beginning. All said and done, Mother Divine already knew the next step. She was destiny after all. That was the second chapter. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you felt a sense of devotion towards our history, our heritage, our beautiful Sanatana Dharma, and that is my sole objective, to bring the truth to you in your own time, at your own pace, that you can then assimilate and imbibe in your life and keep our, as I would say, history, heritage, and dharma alive. Sanatana Dharma needs you, and whom we consider gods, they were our ancestors at one time. Over a long period of time, maybe other groups, other people have been quite successful in deeming it all mythology, but it isn't mythology. It's our heritage. It's our inheritance. This is what we are born into, or this is what we are born into, and this is our light to carry forward, if that makes sense. So, writing a book such as this, it's very taxing, very draining. It takes an extraordinary amount of discipline, time, energy, attention, but above all, grace. It needs all of those elements. And I've almost been meditative while writing this book in ways beyond what I can put into words. So on that note, I will take your leave now. Thank you very much. And once again, wish you all a very happy Guru Poornima. May you continue to do beautiful things with your blessed lives and continue to spread goodness, kindness, empathy, joy, love around you. Thank you. Narayani Namostute.